Loyal listener David Alcock contacted us about a video he'd seen on the video sharing website, YouTube. It was called Muslim Demographics.
Well, I received a link to this video from a friend of mine, and when looking at it, I thought that the facts weren't truly representative, and I thought it would be ideal material for the More or Less team to investigate.
Thank you, David Alcock. Well, our reporter Ollie Hawkins has been investigating. So, Ollie, tell us about this video.
Well, it appeared on YouTube at the end of March this year, and since then it's been viewed over 10 million times. It's smoothly produced and, as you can hear from this clip, has quite a dramatic tone.
Across the entire European Union of 31 countries, the fertility is a mere 1.38. Historical research tells us these numbers are impossible to reverse. In a matter of years, Europe as we know it will cease to exist. Yet the population of Europe is not declining. Why? Immigration. Islamic immigration.
Well, it's rather striking. Do we know who made it?
No, we don't. It's been posted from an anonymous YouTube account simply called Friend of Muslim. They claim to be from Lebanon. We tried to contact the account via the website, but no one replied. The voiceover track sounds American, and the makers identify themselves as Christian, and they describe the video as a call to action.
And what's the video saying?
Well, to put it crudely, the video is claiming that because so many Muslims are migrating into Europe, and because they're having more children than non-Muslim Europeans, Europe will become an Islamic society within a few decades.
Well, we're a statistics programme, so what has it got to do with us?
Well, that one's easy. There are loads of statistics in the video. These are some of the more startling.
Currently in Belgium, 25% of the population are Muslim. In the Netherlands, 50% of all newborns are Muslim. France, 1.8 children per family. Muslims, 8.1. In the last 30 years, the Muslim population of Great Britain rose from 82,000 to 2.5 million, a 30-fold increase.
So let's deal with those figures one at a time. Are 25% of Belgians Muslim?
No, the most recent estimate is 6%.
And what about Dutch babies? Are half of all newborns in the Netherlands Muslims?
This one is interesting because the data simply doesn't exist. Like many European countries, the Netherlands doesn't record religion in the birth statistics. However, Statistics Netherlands estimates that Muslims are 5% of the Dutch population. So if the claim is true, that would mean 5% of the population is having 50% of the babies.
That sounds unlikely.
Well, it is unlikely. We've done some sums, you can check them on the More or Less website, and we think that for the claim to be true, Dutch Muslims would need to be reproducing at around 14 times the rate of their non-Muslim neighbours.
Ouch. What about Muslims in France having a fertility rate of 8.1?
Again, we don't have the data to know for certain, but it's also implausible. That would be higher than any country in the world. According to the UN, Niger has the highest fertility rate in the world at 7.15, and the fertility rates in Algeria and Morocco, the two countries that send the largest numbers of Muslim immigrants to France, it's just 2.38. So it's hard to see how the figure of 8.1 for French Muslims can be true.
The video also says that the Muslim population of the UK has grown 30 times in the last 30 years. What about that?
We think that's an exaggeration. They get the figure by estimating that the British Muslim population has grown from 82,000 to 2.5 million. But if you assume that people born in Pakistan and Bangladesh are Muslim, there were 300,000 in the 1981 census. So by underestimating the number of Muslims in Britain 30 years ago, the growth rate is made to look much more dramatic than it actually is. But not all of the claims in the video are based on statistics. Have a listen to this.
The German government, the first to talk about this publicly, recently released a statement saying, "The fall in the German population can no longer be stopped. Its downward spiral is no longer reversible. It will be a Muslim state by the year 2050.
Wow.
Yes, wow, if it's true. We tracked down the press release, and in it, a German official does say the first half of the quote. But he doesn't say anything about Germany becoming an Islamic state. His name is Walter Rademacher, and he's now the chief statistician of the European Union. We called him, and this is what he has to say about it.
The quotation is simply not true. There is no source which can be quoted that the German government has published such kind of opinion. So I feel very mad. The message of the publication has been turned upside down. This is the worst way to use statistical data.
So lots of the claims in the video don't really stand up to scrutiny, but what about the overall argument? Is Europe going to become an Islamic society in the next few decades?
Well, the video is basing its projections on something called the total fertility rate, which it claims is low for most European countries but high for Muslim immigrants. Now, the total fertility rate is an interesting statistic because it takes the number of children women of different ages are giving birth to right now and uses those figures to estimate how many children a woman would give birth to if, and this is the important bit, if she has the current age-specific fertility rates at each stage of her life.
I'm just going to try and pause and absorb that. So the total fertility rate is a hypothetical figure. It describes how many children a hypothetical, not actually real woman would have if over the course of her life she had as many children as a typical 15 to 18-year-old woman of today, and then she had as many children as a typical 18 to 25-year-old of today, and so on. Is that right?
Exactly.
And any long-term projections based on these total fertility rates are only going to be valid assuming the current rates don't change.
Exactly, and they do change, which is why population projections are so uncertain and why they have been wrong so many times in the past. The video suggests that once the total fertility rate of a population drops below a certain tipping point, it goes into irreversible decline. And yet in recent years we've seen fertility rates increase from very low levels across the whole of Europe. Here's Walter Rademacher again.
The fertility rate is not 1.38, but currently it's 1.53, and it has been rising steadily at an annual rate of plus 0.02 since 2002. So it's the contrary of what has been published in the video.
He also told me that in the last 15 years there have been significant reversals in countries that did have very low fertility rates. So in Spain it was 1.16 in 1998, but by 2007 it was 1.4. Similar reversals have taken place in countries like Italy and the UK. In fact, the fertility rate is now increasing in 5 of the 6 most populous European countries.
Hang on, though. Might those rising fertility rates be because of exactly what the video is talking about, which is Muslim immigrants with high birth rates?
Well, yes, they might. We don't have the data to be sure. Although fertility rates in the UK have been increasing at all age ranges, especially in the over 40s, so I suspect the story is a little bit more complicated. We also need to remember that the fertility rates of immigrants can change too. Historically, the fertility rates of migrants tend to converge on those of the society they live in over time.
I also discussed the video with Dr. Andrew Hind, a demographer at Southampton University, and I asked him first to comment on the reliability of long-range demographic forecasts.
I mean, just to take an example of how wildly out population projections can be, in the 1930s there were population projections made of the UK that by the end of the century the UK population would be 20 million. Well, it turned out to be 50 million. That's how far out you can get when you're moving 40 or 50 years down the line and not taking into account the uncertainty. So they've picked a figure for fertility, they've simply extrapolated out for 40 years and they get this kind of figure. It's highly unreliable.
What struck me about this video was how powerful these numbers could be. They're there in black and white, they've got quite professional graphics, they've all got citations, although on the small YouTube screen it's often hard to see what the citation is, but they all seem to be sourced, and 10 million people have had a look. Numbers can be terribly, terribly powerful, and they can also be misleading.
Yes, they can if they're presented without adequate context. It's one thing citing the source that looks authoritative, but what we really need to know is what the numbers actually represent. They're using the numbers to build up a kind of picture of a Europe which is increasingly Islamicized over the next 50 years. In order to understand why that picture is probably false, you need to know a lot more about the context.
Dr. Andrew Hind from Southampton University. Now, in case you want to find out more about this, we've posted our own YouTube video on this subject. You can find it by going to our website, bbc.co.uk/moreorless, or by going to YouTube and searching for Muslim demographics, the truth.